My first question is actually for brand owners. What would you like to see governments do in the region? This is your opportunity to tell us what you think governments could do. Dara, you're going to get your turn. So who would like to go first?
Okay, there's a few really practical things that would help us. So for example, quite a few governments don't allow the use of food-grade recycled PET in bottles, which makes it very difficult for us to achieve our target. So we'd love to see standards on food-grade PET across the region, and we'd like to see that built into the regulation and permitted so that we can move forward.
And I'll just add on anything that continues to encourage take back and recycling. So any sort of policies that help communicate to consumers how important that is for us to get our materials back so we can reuse them.
Ian, yes, please.
This one? Oh, yeah. Thanks. I'd agree with all of that. The other thing would be, it'd be great if we could have an ASEAN legislation, if you like. I know that's a big ask, but just having something that was consistent across the region, just so we could all obey the same rules. There's so many MNCs who are playing in all of these countries. It'd just make it so much more straightforward if there was one legislation, one way forward. I think that'd be a much easier play.
Renae, did you want to add?
I would kind of agree with what you had to say, Ellen. Is some sort of incentive for the take back, at least to kind of kickstart people wanting to recycle and putting some sort of incentive in place. I think that we've learned that from other regions. That's what really helps to get consumers involved.
Fantastic. Now, Dr. Nagu, would you like to have your chance to respond and tell business what you would like to see them do to help you in your job?
Right, thank you. Good evening again. Some interesting ideas. I mean, on the RPET and all that, we still have to work on them. I mean, Malaysia is one of them that does not allow at the moment, I think. I think it's a great idea to have a regional harmonization. I mean, to have a legal system across ASEAN will be difficult, you know, because we've got different economies with different state of progress. Actually, what we have in our roadmap is starting off with a regional cooperation. And we can do it just not with the governments, but at least to get it on the agenda. We have got a platform on ASEAN Senior Officials on Environment. So it'd be great to translate what's happening on last year, the United Nations organized the UN Environmental Assembly, which had a big segment on plastic pollution and marine debris. Yep. If that could be translated to a regional program, and not just governments, but also people in business getting on board, and to share, I think as a first step is not to come out with legislation, but to share case studies that work around the region, because what's happening in Indonesia or Malaysia that's working will be great. That's a first step before we go to more legal kind of documents, right? That's
fantastic.
Just,
so you're not asking them to do something now? Oh. Collaborate, I imagine.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Right. Thank you. I have a systems thinking question. Given that we have sometimes quite different opinions between corporate positioning and government positioning and community take up, we've heard a lot about education. How would you apply your knowledge about getting collaboration into the industry, or sorry, into the sector?
Yeah. So again, in the context of what I spoke about and much of the discussion that we have all participated in, sometimes when we tend to legislate and we tend to have policies and regulations, we are also drawing boundaries. For example, we heard a lot about local recycling within Malaysia, okay? But with all of these interventions, we should also look for some opportunities, even if they come as side effects. For example, when we have something that we can't recycle outside, that tells us we should try to cater for example, repair can be done within our local boundaries. Or Why don't look outside the boundaries and see maybe we can recycle some of the other things, and somebody else can partner with us to recycle our e-waste. So it's not just about restricting ourselves or drawing boundaries, but looking beyond, and again looking for a little bit longer term. And as I said, with every intervention, there are opportunities that we have to look into. So for example, if you remember the supply chain diagram for a circular economy that I drew, so there was, so now since we are heavily on it, we have to see what are the new refurbishing, recycling, reusing opportunities. These are not something to be placed on the back burner, but this is something to be actively sought, planned, and put into the plan for. And again, as I said, these have to be actively thought. You can bring in design thinking as well into the system thinking approach. They both complement each other. And that solution will be a much more sustainable, embraceable solution than something that's done in silo or mandated upon from outside.
Thank you. My last question is going to start with Steve and then others who would like to participate in it, and it will end with Doug. So if you've noticed, there's been a number of pledges made, and often there's this debate between what is recyclable and what actually gets recycled. If you've seen the recycling industry in the US and Europe have made a definition that is quite narrow because it's based on what is actually able to be recycled in the country, in the specifics of that context, which is quite narrowing. Yet there's also a lot of commitments about it is technically recyclable. So that pretty much captures 100% of plastic, technically recyclable. I would like views from the floor, and I'll start with Steve, about where do we find that medium ground between the two views.
To me, earlier I mentioned about technically we can recycle all the plastic scrap. It's a matter of technology to people. At the same time, there's always conflict between recyclers' goal and also the government's goal, which is one is about environmental focus. The other one is about profitability. I think we should have a policy to balance these two things. Today we talk about single-use plastic. Why we have this one appear in the media all the time? Because a lot of people, they don't have solution. But most of the people here today, they have solution, especially the recycler. Recycler don't see any problem because they are the solution, because they are the key. And what we need to do, like earlier also mentioned by lots of speakers, apart from collection, we need sorting. And also we need machinery. And I think all the brand owner, like Coca-Cola, HP, they all have solution. We talk about, for example, cartridge. And cartridge is also something that we can recycle 100%. It's a matter of cost and also how you do it and the support of the general public as well as the government.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment?
I will. Between the two goals, I mean, I think by saying everything has to be 100% recyclable, I'm more in the value chain, that's why I didn't know if it was a brand or not. But I think it forces then the component suppliers to make sure our products are recyclable and we enable recycling. Mm-hmm. So it's two different problems. And then what you are really focused on is how do you actually get things into the system, which the educating a consumer is probably a bit more challenging at this point. And there will always be a time where we can re-up, right? So once we get everything recyclable, then we can really all start to focus on recycling.
Yep, fantastic.
And for a company like HP, we're moving into the 3D printing space, right? So the fourth industrial revolution, which is going to revolutionize and democratize manufacturing. And as we're looking to stand up this whole new industry, we're thinking through how do we create standards from the beginning, materials from the beginning in 3D printing of manufacturing at scale, that are sustainable, that are recyclable. The two plastics that we use today in our 3D printers, PA11 and PA12, are both recyclable. So I think as we're innovating for the future, there's certainly the situation we have today with products we're making and selling today, but what about the products that we're creating for the future and starting today to design the closed loop process in right from the very beginning?
Very quick, yeah.
Can I add something just practical to that? So whilst we have 100% recyclable PET bottles, for example, they're not necessarily always optimal in terms of recyclability. So I think what would be helpful too for the beverage industry is a set of design guidelines on what glue to use, what label to use, how to optimize what we are using, even if it is 100% recyclable, to make the process work more smoothly. And I think that could be something really practical and applicable for the industry in this region.
Yep. Thank you.
I just want to add that as a country, we are concerned about the term recyclability, because the definition of recyclable. Because I think many advanced countries have got this facility to recycle, it gets recycled, but the low-grade plastics, they assume it's recycled, but it's sent off to many other countries. End up in most of the time in developing countries, which are challenged with even more bigger issues. So I think this has to come into a certain context, because at the developed country and advanced countries, and we have recycled, but it does not really close the loop. That's questions that we need to discuss in more detail.
Exporting rubbish doesn't equal recycling. Yes.
Somehow it gets computed in.
Yeah.
Quick note.
Yes, yeah, please.
On the same lines of poor country versus developed countries, part of it is also about, so we design, and then we expect it to be biologically degradable. Theoretically, technologically, everything is degradable. But again, the question of optimality and how much we want to do it, right? So poor countries have their own ways of doing things. We have sorters manually sorting, and that's a big value add, which we don't have in the richer countries, and there is an expensive cost doing it upstream. And downstream has immense consequences when jeans get stuck in a sorting plant and then you pay more than $1 million a year on maintenance and repair. So the context of how much we want to recycle, whether it's a poor country or a richer country, also is part of the problem that needs to be analyzed, and then we have to come with a solution for that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Oh, Ian wants to make a quick comment.
Sorry, Trish. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll be really
No, I'm not giving any hints, am I?
very subtle as ever. No, I was thinking there's been a lot of discussion today about waste and trash, and we talked a little bit about the Japanese circular economy, and in their definition, waste and trash is only when something actually goes for waste into landfill. While there's value, it's a product for sale, for reuse, for someone to use even if they don't pay for it, but if they're going to reuse it, then that has value. So I think we need to change the conversation around what our materials are, and stop referring to these materials as waste and trash, because they're not yet until we've decided to actually put them into landfill. So it's a different way of thinking, I think, is what we need to take forward.
And Doug is going to give us our final comment, but I do simply have to say that despite us running late all day, the minister has managed to arrive early. Irony. So I will get Doug to actually give your answer, but after we've thanked our guests here, and you could do it as part of your close if that's all right.
So I would just say that we need to put a cost onto waste. And if you have a cost on waste, then the recyclability becomes much easier, whether your country today has the capacity to recycle everything. If there's a cost on disposing, which a lot of countries don't have, then there's no incentive for people to figure out the ways to achieve the recyclability, which all of the packaging is now trying to be aiming for. But if you don't have the capacity in the market and there's no price incentive to direct people to not throw it out, then you don't get that recycling. And so standardization of the labeling and the packaging is a huge thing that when we design a product, think about how to pull it apart not just the label itself, but how to take all of the pieces so that the recyclers can have that capacity. But without a cost on it, we can't drive that innovation.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to our panel. Thank you very much to all of you. Doug will now be doing our wrap up, but let's thank our panel.